I also want to take a moment here to remember Russell Libby. 17 years as the executive director of this organization, this community. He passed away in December of 2012. He was only 56 years old, and that is a heartbreaking loss, not only for MOFGA, but for the good food movement, the organic food movement around this country, and I think around the world. He had that kind of impact. So can we just take a moment to think about Russell and thank him for all he did to help us move forward? I also want to take just a moment to remember another tremendous MOFGA supporter named Polly Guth, who most of you, that name might not ring a bell with most of you, but she passed away this past June. And her Partridge Foundation, which is the John and Polly Guth Charitable Fund, has been instrumental over the last several years in supporting MOFGA's farmer training programs through an endowment building campaign that has been very successful. And she has been a huge part of that and has been right up until her death. We've recognized Polly's contribution to our work by placing a granite bench on the common right over there. It's beautiful. It's engraved with the remembrance, Polly Guth, inspiring farmers for generations to come. Thank you, Polly. And now as we move into our first keynote of our 40th fair, let's talk about a gentleman who grew up on a small farm in Maryland. He's the son of a sharecropper, but he also had a knack for basketball. So early on, you know, this is the way it goes. Basketball came first. Will Allen set a number of records playing for the University of Miami. He played in the American Basketball Association for a year, and then he migrated to Europe, and he played in the European League, where he played in Belgium. So in Belgium, Will reconnected with his farming roots and began raising food for his family and for his teammates. He returns to the United States. He starts a career in corporate sales and marketing. And eventually he finds himself in suburban Milwaukee with an opportunity to grow food for his neighborhood by operating an urban farm. He's a corporate executive. He's growing food for his neighbors. I like that idea. So that was the beginning of a major transformation for Will Allen, as youngsters from the neighborhood started asking him for advice on how to grow their own food. You know, you do something, people see you're doing a good thing, and they want to do it too, and that's a good thing too. So in the middle 90s, the neighborhood kids become, through Will's vision, a group called Youth Corps. And then Will forms another nonprofit organization called Growing Power. The idea is he wants to continue his urban farm training program, which is focused on building community food system security. Will has been an innovator in methods of composting, vermiculture, and aquaponics. He grows great volumes of food in small areas. I've been to his amazing farm in Milwaukee a couple of different times, and it's a great spot with lots of great food growing. And he's been growing his Growing Power program along with the food he's growing, so that now this program is beginning to expand to other countries around the world. He's an innovative thinker. His focus is on young people, and it's gained him extraordinary recognition. 2008, he was awarded a MacArthur Fellowship. That's that Genius Award, and Will is a genius. He's a farmer, and he's a genius. In May of 2010, Time magazine named Will Allen one of the world's top 100 most influential people. And despite a travel schedule that takes him around the world, and which has taken him to the Common Ground Country Fair today, which we're very fortunate to have as a development, Will continues to farm, and he continues to direct the operations at Growing Power, Inc. So I say, let's welcome Will Allen, our Friday morning keynote speaker.
Good morning. What a glorious morning. Farmers like this kind of weather. We have to deal with all kinds of weather, so this is nothing new. So hopefully you're comfortable and everything. But what a great fair. I don't think I've ever spoke at a fair this large. And to really meet a lot of, like-minded folks that want to eat good food. Many of you are growing good food, whether it's in your backyard or side yard or on your small farm or larger farm. And the fact that you're growing food that's natural, sustainable, or organic, it really warms my heart, because that's where we need to be. Of course, I think everybody knows that we have some serious issues with our food. Maybe not so much in your area, because you guys grow a lot of great food here, but around the country, especially in our cities where most people live today, and as we look around the world where most people are moving into cities, we're not doing a very good job in making sure people are eating good food. They're eating something, but it's not good food. And that's what we focus on at Growing Power, to really try to take the leadership in terms of being able to make sure that people have access to good food. We have about 4,500 farmers markets in the country. We have many CSAs. We have a lot of farmers markets, CSAs, and a lot of different programs. But the majority of our population eat in box grocery stores. So one of the things we're trying to do at Growing Power, and we're trying to do in other cities that I work in, as a matter of fact, when I leave here, I'm going to New Jersey, Hillsborough, New Jersey, to do a workshop, a training workshop, with some of our staff from Growing Power who are already there, is to really grow farmers. We don't have enough farmers that can grow good food. So that's what we're doing. But there's another problem we have in this country, and you've heard the headlines, and our cities and places like Milwaukee where we've had problems recently, problems in places like Charlotte, North Carolina, the largest city in North Carolina, and just different places all over the country, where people are living in poverty. People are living in situations where they don't have access to food like you all have here. That we have to fix that. And one of the things that, one of the projects that I just wrote this proposal that's circulating now, and the proposal really speaks to that. It speaks to the fact that our food system can fix a lot of these problems. Because as we look inside these cities, inside these communities within these major cities, there are no jobs. People are living in poverty, and I'll take Milwaukee for example. The majority of folks that live in these at-risk communities, and there are a lot of them, the life expectancy, if you drive through Milwaukee, ranges from, folks that it's a 20-year discrepancy as you drive from one community and just a few miles into another community. We have the highest infant mortality rate in the nation, which is related to prenatal care and the food that people eat and so forth. So we have a huge problem. And the fact that we have one zip code that's the highest zip code in the nation for incarceration of African American males. So a few years ago, I'll tell this little story. A few years ago, we received some funding through the feds that came through Milwaukee to the city of Milwaukee, and they called me and they said, "Will, we have this funding. that we want you to have. You can only use it. The city was kind of desperate because they had to use this funding within a certain period of time, and they were at the end of that time. And they said you can only use this money for supplies. Do you have a program? So they knew we were building high tunnels or hoop houses, however you all call them. And I said, yeah, we can build hoop houses, and I can use that as a training piece on the construction side to train 150 folks. So, but we had no money for salaries. So it was my bright idea to, because I believe in folks having a living wage, and this was a workforce development project, my bright idea was to pay $12 an hour for these individuals. We did our work. We interviewed over 300. Most of the folks that we interviewed had felony records. Many of them hadn't worked for over 10 years. But we thought we were doing a good job by hiring them, I thought paying them $12 an hour would help them both in a social way, but also anchor them long enough that we could train them, because part of the training was going to be construction, and then teaching them how to grow soil, compost, and then teach them how to farm. So we started the project, and one of the first things that happened was the first paycheck they received we used a paycheck service to do their payroll, is the fact that many of these folks had deductions for child support from their paycheck. So about 50 of them came into our office wanting to know, why is this money being taken out? And you know, we found that some of the young men had kids in 4 different states and so forth, and so that was a barrier for a lot of them, because they didn't take it in the spirit of they should be taking care of their kids. They took it in a spirit that I'm not going to be making this $12 an hour. So that was one of the issues that we had to deal with right away. Just to tell you how complicated and how complex this whole thing about trying to help folks in the inner city. So the other issue that we didn't realize is that these guys couldn't work an 8-hour workday. They flat out couldn't work an 8-hour workday. So the project, I think, was a success, because out of the 150, I think we hired, the other carrot on the end was that if they made it through a year, they would have a full-time job. Most workforce development projects around the nation, they don't guarantee you a job. They train you, most of the time it's part-time, and then they don't guarantee you a job. So we hired about 50, survived of the 150 that became permanent employees for us. So we thought that was a pretty good success. So one of the things that we learned in doing this, and this next project that we plan to hire over 5,000 over the next 10 years, is that you really have to treat the whole body of the person. It's not just giving them a job, because what happens is many of these folks, even though they passed the drug test, they were still using. Many of them were using alcohol or drugs. Many of them had multiple places that they were living, even though they gave you an address. So trying to track them was very difficult, because that was part of our evaluation, is to track them to find out why they didn't make it, and to do follow-up and evaluation and so forth. So what we've learned is that you really have to have a social worker or connect with social service agencies. You have to have a psychologist. They're not ready to work an 8-hour job. So you have to do it in stages along a continuum. So as I wrote this new proposal that has been presented to the city council and others in Milwaukee and the state government to fund it, we'll have those things in place so we can treat the whole person, because Otherwise, they're just going right back to what they were doing, you know, on the street, or they go right back into incarceration. So that's one of the projects. But I really want to talk about, over the years, what we've done at Growing Power. Starting, and this is our 24th year. Starting in 1993, I was actually driving down Silver Spring Drive in Milwaukee, and I was working for Procter & Gamble in sales and sales technology, and I was going to one of my accounts, and I saw this old greenhouse operation. And something made me stop, and it had a for sale sign. I called a number, and it was owned by the city of Milwaukee. So when I got back home, I called this number, this 286 number, and I made connection to the real estate department for the city of Milwaukee. And I went through this process. To make a long story short, it was between myself and a church. And I kind of got lucky, because when I went before the real estate committee that was made up of city council people, about 5 or 6 of them, the city council person, Alderman Don Richards, who had that area, was a former priest, and he was a farm boy from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And I gave my proposal, and he stepped to the mic and he said, I really like this guy's proposal because I have enough churches in my area, in my district. And what he's about to do is religion in itself. So working with these young people and teaching them about how to grow food in a sustainable way. So that's how I was able to get the property at that point. And of course, it's much different than growing, because I come from a rural agricultural background, but growing inside a city is much different, because about 80% of the land is asphalt or concrete. So all of a sudden, you want to grow this food to change the dynamics of the food situation. So how do you do it? Well, the first thing I did, because I grew up on a small farm and we did composting in the 50s and 60s as I grew up, was to grow soil. But we're talking about growing a lot of soil, not just a little bit of soil. Not just 20 or 30 or 100 yards, but thousands of yards of compost. So that's what we started doing back then. And as soon as we started working, there were a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and if you go and set up in any neighborhood in America, in a city, kids are going to come out. Because they have nothing to do. They're sitting around, they're looking for stuff to do, and there are not enough summer jobs, and this is in the summertime when we farm. And so kids started coming over, and I started engaging those kids, and from there I got to know their parents. And then we started a youth corps of kids, starting at 8 years old. And that's how we got our start. To really engage ourselves with the community, because if you're not able to engage with the community, nothing will happen. The previous owner had a very bad relationship with the community. And these were glass greenhouses, A-frame, the old A-frame greenhouses, and there were a lot of holes in the glass. And those holes came from kids throwing rocks across the creek into his facility. And so that's really important, to get that engagement and really get to know the families. And then all of a sudden, all of that stuff stopped, because we had done our work, our first part of our work. So as we moved along a continuum, we started doing youth projects. And then I started working with the criminal justice system with kids that had been sent away to youth prisons. They probably shouldn't have been sent away, because they had poor representation, and that's why they were in these prisons for some of them over 4 or 5 years. And they were coming back into the community. So I worked with them in a therapy program of growing food. Because I think we all know that when we touch the soil, it's a very spiritual thing to touch the soil. To be able to work in the soil is something that really heals people. And that's what happened with these young people. They really enjoyed working in the soil and growing something. To see something come from a seed to a finished product was something that was unbelievable to them, because they never knew where their food came from. They thought their food came from the grocery store. They had no idea it originated from the soil and how it was grown and what you had to do in terms of harvest, taking care of it and harvesting it and washing it and learning how to cook with what they grew. So that's been the basis of our work over these years, and working with the kids is not just midstream giving them something and say, go cook it, but to really see where it starts in terms of growing the soil, growing the product, maintaining the product, harvesting the product, processing it into something that they can use to eat. So that's been part of our project, but along the way, more and more adults wanted to get involved, and because so many adults didn't know how to grow food themselves. So we started our training programs that exist today. We have about 4 different training programs, similar to what they're doing here, both urban and rural, because what's happened is that we're also farming on the edges of these cities, in suburbs that used to be farming communities that are now, because of urban sprawl, suburban communities, but they are pockets of land to be had. So we try to stay within a half hour of the city of Milwaukee to be able to grow food on the edges of our city. So not only are we growing in the city, but this thing about growing on asphalt, I'm going to tell you how we do it. What we do is we find a space, and we're looking for larger spaces, is that we first put down wood chip on top of the asphalt, and then we build beds that are 36 inches wide with 18-inch pathways. You have to use your imagination, because most of the time I'm showing this on a screen, over 1,000 images. Some of you have seen my PowerPoint. It's over 1,087, I think it's up to. And you can really see how it's done. But I'm going to try to explain how it's done. It's 36-inch wide beds, 18-inch pathways. And the reason that the 18-inch pathways is because my feet will fit in the pathways. So that's how it was designed back in the day. 24 inches high on some of the best compost that hasn't been run through a screener. The compost that we use comes right out of the system to build these beds. So that's what we do. We also developed a technique to build all of our hoop houses. We have a jig that bends the pipe, and our hoop houses are made out of 17-gauge pipe, which is the top rail of a cyclone fence. It bends in our jig. So that's how our houses are built. 20 by 96 feet. You can get 4 of those beds inside of those hoop houses. So that's how we grow in the city. There are many groups that try to grow with topsoil. And what happens with topsoil, as soon as it rains outside, all the fertility flushes out and it goes into the sewers and everywhere else. That doesn't happen with our protocol and the thing that we do. So we started putting up these hoop houses, and I talked to you earlier about the young men and women that we hired through this program. So we have about 150 hoop houses now that we grow year-round. So we grow 3 different crops. And you'll say, well, you guys weather's just like ours. We get minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. How do you do it without using fossil fuel? Well, what we do is we make something that I experimented with called hot mix. We call it hot mix. It's a combination of wood chip, and we're in Milwaukee, the largest brewery city in America. So we use brewery waste. We blend that together. We put that in the four corners of each hoop house, a pile that's as tall as me, about 10 feet in diameter, and then we cap it with about 2 feet of wood chip, and that produces 150-degree temperature comes out of those piles. We also, when we build these hoop houses, we use 2 layers of poly. We bank wood chip around the exterior because that's where a lot of the cold air would come in. So that prevents cold air from coming in. We also use 9-gauge wire every 3 feet over the beds. When it gets 25 degrees or colder, we cover those beds in the wintertime. And we open them back up. If it's, say, minus 2 or 3 degrees, we may have to keep that plastic on for several days. But we open it up so we can get airflow and so forth in there. And that's how we're able to grow about 40 different winter hardy greens, many of which you'll find in the Johnny's catalog, where we order much of our seed. So that's one of the things that we do. The other thing that we started doing over 20 years ago is called aquaponics, where we're growing fish and plants in the same system. And we have the largest aquaponics system in the Midwest, growing lake perch, which is a favorite fish of folks in Milwaukee and the fish fries and around the Midwest. And we started that 20 years ago, and today we grow over 100,000 fish, which is really a drop in the bucket of where we need to be. But those fish are now, commercially, you cannot fish for lake perch in the Great Lakes anymore commercially, because the numbers are so small and the fact that the fish are mercury contaminated. So the only way to get a clean fish, a natural fish, because we don't have an organic certification yet in America for aquaculture. But the only way to eat a clean fish, a fish that you could eat every day of the week, is to grow it inside. So those systems that we have in the greenhouses, we dig down 7 feet and we build this system in the ground, because you get a little geothermal and you are able to stabilize the water temperature, because these are carnivores and they're cold weather fish, but they thrive best and eat best at 68 degrees, so you have to keep the water temperature at 68 degrees to be able to grow them within a 10-month period. Now, aquaponics is the fastest growing piece of agriculture in America today. There are people that are doing aquaponics on all different types of scales. And it's important because you're able to get 2 crops. You get the fish that take about 13 months from birth, 3 months as fingerlings in a hatchery, and then 10 months in a grow-out system. But you're able to harvest greens and other crops, tomatoes, on vertical beds, because it's important to be able to use vertical space. This is high-valued space we're talking about. So we're not just growing on one plane in a greenhouse, we're growing on multiple levels. 7 levels in some of our houses we're growing at to maximize the square footage. One of the things that we look at in our production is not hectares or acres, but square footage. How much can you make in a square foot? That's where it's at. When you're doing this intensive kind of high-valued space operation. So we're looking at growing at least $5 a square foot, which equates to over $200,000 an acre. And when you're growing things like microgreens, like sunflower sprouts and pea shoots and and spicy sprouts, and you're talking at $50 a square foot in an annual year. So that's what the future will look like. And that's what people are trying to do inside cities, is to be able to maximize the space, to be able to grow inside buildings, to be able to put up hoop houses, to put up greenhouses, to be able to grow food close to where people live. Because it makes absolutely no sense that 99% of the food that comes into Milwaukee travels over 1,500 miles away. 99%. Doesn't make sense. So, so this local food movement is not only in your area, but this local food movement that we're pushing is growing everywhere. And we want it to grow because that's the only way that we can end poverty in the world, is to do it on a local level. To make sure that people have access to good food, is to be able to do it on a local level. And I can't say that enough. It's about local. People want local. Wholesalers want local today because you consumers are demanding that. Cisco. We sell up to 800 cases of salad mix to Cisco, our local Cisco. And the reason we do that is because they can get it to those places that we cannot get our food to. And six other wholesalers we deliver to. That's how we're going to be able to do it in these cities. And believe it or not, you all are affected by what happens in Milwaukee, what happens in Detroit, what happens in Washington, D.C., what happens in New York City, because sometimes you might want to visit those places. And we want to make sure that when you visit those communities, you're going into a safe and sustainable place, just like where you live today. That's where we're at. So, you know, that's the stuff that we're working on, and a lot of other things. But one of the things we have to do is let our political folks, this next farm bill, we cannot blow it. This next farm bill, we're going to have to get money for programs like you have here, and programs like Growing Power and others around the country to train new farmers. We have an aging farmer population. We have to replace all those farmers. We have to grow some farmers, otherwise we will not have this food. Because right now, all of these places that want food in our cities, these wholesalers, retailers, whoever, they can't get it because it's not there. It's not enough. It's just a small amount. We have to grow that. It's a tremendous opportunity. And all of you who garden or farm, you know it's the hardest occupation in America. Not trying to be disrespectful for any other occupation. But to be a sustainable farmer is the hardest thing you could possibly do. It is for me anyway. But it's the most rewarding thing to be able to feed folks good food. To be able to celebrate things with good food. It brings people together. It changes the way we look at each other, the way we talk to each other around some good food. And everybody should have that opportunity to be able to sit down and eat some good food like you guys are going to eat here. I've already started. You know, you can tell. I don't need an umbrella. I'm a farmer. I don't need an umbrella. So you can tell I didn't miss too many meals, you know. But anyway, what I'd like to do now is kind of open it up to some questions. Because I have bad ears, if anybody have a question, you have to come close, unless we have a mic out there or something. I don't think we do. But I'd like to open up to answer questions, because I really like answering questions. Anybody have a question? Come on up. Not very much. Yeah, we're still educating This proposal that I have is being presented to the City Council. They say a lot of nice things, but as far as the financial support to really scale this up, because that's what we have to do, we have to scale up what we're currently doing. We need some real dollars now to scale it up from government. It's much cheaper to give us money to work with folks that have come out of incarceration to incarcerate a person. It costs 10 times more to send somebody to jail than it does to fix their life or help fix their life. Yes?
What do you recommend for funding? I work with a farm to school and I teach cooking classes. How do you, we don't
Okay, the question is, what do I recommend for funding? There's a lot of different funding mechanisms. USDA programs are very difficult today because there's so many people going after a small pot of money. And that's why in the Farm Bill we need to increase the amount of money that's going for farmer training and youth training and things like that. We need to make sure that small farmers have access to FSA programs because regardless, we farm 300 acres, we're not able to access FSA loans because we're a nonprofit organization. So we're working to change that. We're working with Bill Sack's office right now because he visited Growing Power and that's one of the things we talked about. So, but we need everybody on board to help us get there. So this next Farm Bill is really crucial for funding for programs like yours. Yes?
How much is the annual operating budget?
Our annual operating budget's around $5 million.
I've seen in Milwaukee, I've seen people machine harvesting eelgrass out of the little lakes, the little ponds by the lake. Have you ever used eelgrass in your compost?
No, we haven't. You know, it's been very difficult for us to get access to that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You have a Okay. The question is, do I have any advice on how to keep this buy local movement that's everywhere in almost every state today? Keep those numbers up. I don't think the numbers have gone down. Most of our farmers markets like yours are this year for some reason, well, the last 2 years, the attendance has been down a bit. What I think is happening is a lot of people are shopping in the box grocery stores because they're bringing in more organic or so-called organic food into the box stores, and a lot of people feel that it's more convenient for them to go buy in a box store than to get off their butt in the morning and come to a farmer's market. So we need to keep pushing and educating people, and that's part of, you know, those grocery stores can promote a lot because they have the dollars to promote. We need to come up with some funding to be able to promote the farmers markets, promote the CSAs and so forth. So we need help. One of the things that producers have a hard time doing is asking for help. So, but I think if you work in a cooperative way with each other, we can start asking for help and finding some funding to promote our cause for local, real healthy, sustainable food. Because we don't know where this food is coming from, that's coming into, from wherever it's coming from. I don't want to pick on just one state. Okay, the question is, do the breweries give us the waste product? Yes. But there's some competition for the waste product for growing. A lot of cattle people get those brewery grains for their cattle. So we have to share it with them as well. But there's a lot. In Milwaukee, there's a lot. We pick up 150,000 pounds a week. But there's a lot. We have Miller Brewery that does a silo of grains a day in their beer production. So there's a lot of that waste.
Yeah, there are a lot of empty mills in Maine and New England. Have you ever worked in one of those mills, rehabbing it to create a farm or aquaponics?
The question is, or the statement/question, there are a lot of mills in Maine. I just found out that from this gentleman. But it's the same as a vacant building. Milwaukee was an industrial city. It has a lot of closed factories and buildings that you can do aquaponics and mushrooms and different things in, and that's what's happening. So yes, you can use those to grow healthy fish or mushrooms and other things, or even vegetables with the new lighting systems that they have.
When things get really tough, when it gets really frustrating, how do you take care of yourself emotionally and spiritually? When things get really tough and frustrating, how do you take care of yourself emotionally and spiritually? How do you find the strength to keep going, and what do you turn to keep that endurance up?
That's a great question, because this is tough work, and you know, most weeks I work 7 days a week, a lot of hours, and you have to keep yourself physically in shape. For one thing, if you're farming, my first love is farming. I can do this talking and workshops and training and all that stuff, but you know, I get energy from folks like you all. When I come to something like this and I see people that are doing exciting things, when I walk through here and see all the exciting projects and all the good food and stuff like that, and when I work with youth and I see these kids that get a thrill out of it, and when people write me and say, you inspired me to go into agriculture, those are the kinds of things that keep me going. Because there are times that you could get very frustrated and say, why am I doing this? When you're dealing with folks that seem like they don't really care. People in power that seem like they don't really care. But it's really the people that, how I keep myself engaged and inspired. And all of you who farm know that you have to have passion to farm. If you're not passionate, you won't stay in the farming very long. So you have to have a lot of passion that's deep-rooted that keeps you going. Yes.
About staying in touch
with to learn about changing the farm bill next time it comes around. Would it be in touch with you? Is there an organization that's really going to push this, what you're talking about, training farmers?
Yeah, you can email me, but there are organizations that have offices in Washington. What is it called? The National Sustainable Coalition or whatever. But for some of the really small farmers, we need an organization that speaks for them. One of the things that we should have in Washington is an office that represents those really small farmers that are in the urban areas, that are out here even. I passed, as I was coming in, a lot of small farmers that maybe have 2 or 3 acres, or 5 acres, or 10 acres, or 20 acres as a small farm. So you have to ask yourself, am I being represented by these groups? So we need somebody that can go up on the hill. We need to be able to get enough money to have an office in D.C. for those small farmers. So if anybody's interested in that, I've been talking about this on college campuses, and there seems to be a lot of interest from young people, especially in political science students, that would love to go to DC and work on a project like that. But we need some senior people that really know people on the Hill that can really get to those folks, mostly the aides to the senators and the Congress people, to really make that change.
Do you have currently programs where you are teaching this system so they can be duplicated nationally and even internationally?
Yeah, we have training programs. We have a commercial urban ag training program. When I leave here today, I'll wind up tonight in Hillsborough, New Jersey at the Duke Farm. It's a 3,000-acre farm that was started by the Dukes out of North Carolina, Duke University, cigarette barons who bought contiguous farms, and now they have about 3,000 acres. They have a farmer training organization there, but we're helping them set up an urban ag training site there. And we go there and train people from that corridor along Trenton and Newark and New York City. People come to the trainings there for the weekend. So that's what I'll be doing this weekend. So yeah, there are a number of training programs. Of course, you have a very good training program here for new farmers, young farmers at this space. So we just need to have more of those, and we need to get more. The good thing is that schools now across the nation are starting to get back into agriculture, especially in our cities. You know, it's amazing how many schools are now doing aquaponics and are doing small scale, and actually there are agricultural schools. There's one in Chicago, there's one in Madison, Wisconsin, there's one in Milwaukee. So there's at least one agricultural school, I bet, in every city in America today. Anybody else? Amen. Amen. You're running. I wish I could still run.
It's about aquaponics. So some companies like Nelson and Pate, they're incredibly expensive. This stuff is completely unrealistic and very circular things. It's not very efficient. But your system, where the trout could run all the way down, has very high nutrient levels. The actual nutrient levels required to grow these foods. So really, we should be looking to you for aquaponic advice, not these large aquaponic companies. Would you speak on that? And
well, not to knock any of those companies, but our systems cost a fraction. They're natural systems. They're built, you know, there's no off-the-shelf technology. You have to build them. One pump operates the entire system. It's recirculating. Same water gets recirculated. The plants remediate the waste that the fish give off, and you're able to grow pretty much any species of fish over whatever time frame it takes. And it's a shorter time frame because you're inside and you're controlling the temperature of the water. But it's important to know the fish that you want to grow. Every region's different. There are some universal fish like bluegill that a lot of people are raising, but believe it or not, in a city like Miami, they're growing cold water fish because the population is changing there, with folks from Nova Scotia and other parts of Canada that are moving in, and northerners that are coming into Miami, and they want to eat a certain things like walleye that can be grown in those type systems. But our systems cost, for a 10,000 gallon system, you can construct it under $20,000. It probably costs about $500,000 if you're using a mechanical system. So you're right, there's a way to do this. The average citizen, we've trained over 1,000 people over the last 10 years to go into aquaponics, and our systems are being built. When you leave a training at Growing Power, you're able to build a system. The question is, do I use worms in the composting process? Yes. What we do, we use 1 part carbon to 1. Now you want me to teach a composting class, right? All right. So to make good compost, you have to have carbon and nitrogen, right? Most compost in America is carbon-based compost. You can't grow anything. Put it around a tree. You can work into your soil. You get some benefit. But what we want to grow is something you can grow directly in. You have to have 1 part carbon, 1 part nitrogen by volume. So if we were going to make a compost system here, you would need how much carbon? You start out with how much carbon? Right where you're standing. All right, I'll tell you. We'll start with 3 wheelbarrows of carbon. So how many wheelbarrows of nitrogen?
3.
No. You need about 6.
Okay,
by volume, yeah. So you do that throughout your whole process, and now you have the start of your compost system, okay? So, as this goes through a process of 8 months to a year in a static pile, because, you know, growing it here, we want a static pile. We don't want to turn it because we'll kick up some smells. When it gets to a certain point and it starts cooling, what we do is put worms on the exterior. And then worms will work their way into the pile. And then you'll have more worms than you'll ever want to see.
Is it open? Can they return to the ground, or is it a closed system?
No, they're going to stay where their food is.
Right.
They'll never leave their food. And where is their food?
The pile.
The pile. Why is there food in the pile?
Because it's not broken down by anything else yet.
Okay, the nitrogen has impregnated itself into the wood chip and the leaves and the soil. So they always have food to eat, and they'll never leave your pile. So yeah, always add worms. They're the only organism that can kill E. coli in their gut. So we just did a worm class for free. You got all this for free. How's our time? Oh, okay. Any more questions? Yes.
Is the nutrient value of the hydroponic fish the same as the nutrient value of
Okay, the question is the nutrient value of fish that we raise in our systems the same as the nutrient value. It's much better because you don't have mercury. If you grow inside, your fish will not have mercury. Okay, anytime you take a fish out of a pond, out of a lake, out of a stream, you will have contaminants in the flesh of the fish. So just keep that in mind, that if you grow fish inside in a biosecure area, you can eat it every day. Expectant mothers can eat it every day. Anybody, children can eat it every day. So I'll be doing a book signing. I'll be doing a book signing somewhere. Ted, where is that going to be? In the bookshop. I'll be doing a book. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you today, and I hope to come back.
Thank you to Will Allen. Will, it's a tradition at MOFGA to award our keynote speakers with a MOFGA t-shirt. Toki Yoshima is the artist for this year's poster. So thank you again.